guys ready?
Alex Jones.
Those thought patterns, the three percenters, QAnon group, or the anti-vaxxers, they all originate from Alex.
How much damage can one man do to school shooting victims?
Alex Jones lied about Sandy Hook.
And the country.
The people who listen to him believe the things that he says.
CNN asks those who know him.
He's not like you or me.
Truth doesn't really matter at all.
CNN Special Report, Megaphone for Conspiracy. Alex Jones, Monday on CNN.
I'm Matthew Chance in Kyiv, and this is CNN.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining me on this Saturday. I'm Amaryl Walker in today for Frederica Whitfield. The price of gas in the U.S. is hitting levels never seen before. AAA saying the national average is now $5 a gallon. It's an all-new-time high. Prices climbing at a dramatic pace, 60 cents in the last month alone. And they're expected to rise even further as we reach peak summer travel season. The high prices also driving inflation to the highest level since 1981. The Consumer Price Index jumping 8.6% in May compared to the same month last year. Now, the White House calling that staggering increase uncomfortably high. CNN's Christine Romans has more now on these troubling new numbers and how Wall Street is reacting.
American consumers are still feeling the pain of higher prices for just about everything, but especially at the pump. Look, the May Consumer Price Index, that number up 8.6% from the year before, the fastest since 1981. And when you look at just the month, prices rose 1% from April to May. 1%, that's a big move in 1 month. Core CPI, that's when they strip out food and energy, which can be more volatile. That rose 6% from last year. Prices across the board more expensive than last year, largely driven by shelter, the biggest yearly gain there since 1991. Food up 10.1%, the first double-digit increase in 41 years. And energy, with gas prices rising nearly 50%, up 4.5% in just the past month alone, as prices hit record after record. Now, this high pace of inflation means the Federal Reserve is all but certain to continue to aggressively raise interest rates when it meets next week. This is an inflation fire. The Fed is the firefighter. There are some who are wondering whether the fire is raging too strongly for the Fed to really be able to get it under control with only a 50 basis point interest rate hike. We will see when the Fed meets next week.
All right, Christine Romans, thank you for that. As Americans look for answers, the Biden administration is working to tamp down economic fears. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez is in Los Angeles, where President Biden is attending the final day of the Summit of Americas. Hi there, Priscilla. So the White House is acknowledging the pain Americans are feeling right now, but they're also shifting blame for this rapid rise in inflation we're seeing.
Well, that's right. And yesterday here in Los Angeles, President Biden spoke at a port in which he said that lowering inflation is a top economic priority. And this came, as you just heard from Christine, as the Consumer Price Index showed that the record gas prices drove inflation to 8.6% and that food prices rose 11.9%. And that has been the reality for the Biden administration as Americans feel that in their pockets and in their wallets. Now, Biden did blame Russian President Vladimir Putin and his war in Ukraine for the soaring prices. Take a listen to what he said.
Make no mistake about it. I understand inflation is a real challenge to American families. Today's inflation report confirmed what Americans already know. Putin's price hike is hitting America hard. Gas prices at the pump, energy and food prices account for half of the monthly price increases since May.
Now, Biden also recognized in those remarks how uncomfortable and what a challenge this has been for Americans. He called on Congress to pass legislation to cut shipping costs in order to lower the price of goods. And he called out oil and gas companies, urging them not to take excessive profit. Now, as you mentioned earlier, the president was here in Los Angeles attending the Summit of the Americas, which was hosted by the United States. And in that, this also came up, the war in Ukraine and the ripple effects it is having across the Western Hemisphere, as we have seen here here at home, while the White House calls inflation, quote, uncomfortably high. Amara?
A lot of people would say it's quite uncomfortable and painful, to say the least. Priscilla Alvarez, thank you. So as Americans are finding it harder than ever to stretch their dollars, that's having an impact everywhere. Joining us now is CNN retail reporter Nathaniel Meyerson. So Nathaniel, I mean, we all see it, right? Every time we go to the grocery store, milk is more expensive, meat is more expensive. Why is inflation on groceries so high right now?
Right. So we're seeing manufacturers and grocery stores, their costs are going up for transportation, labor, fuel, commodities, the raw materials that are needed to make these goods and food. And the companies are passing off these higher costs onto the consumers in the form of higher prices on the shelves. So I guess, you know, you have to adjust to these times, right? So what are people doing? Are they changing their shopping behavior because of these rising prices? Right. So the major grocery stores and big box retailers in the United States are saying that consumers, particularly on the lower income side, are really starting to change their shopping behavior, shopping habits. Walmart said that it's seen consumers switching from buying a gallon of milk to a half gallon of milk. You see dollar stores saying that shoppers are driving to stores closer to their homes to save on gas and not burn as much fuel. Consumers are switching from buying more expensive products like televisions, furniture, and really focusing on the necessities like food and household staples, that sort of thing. You mentioned, you know, some retailers. Are there certain places like, I guess, a Walmart or a Target that people are tending to shop at more often? Right. So under these types of economic conditions, Walmart is very popular among shoppers who are switching over there. Dollar stores are also you know, a place that shoppers go more frequently when times are tough. So you have Dollar General, Dollar Tree, Family Dollar. There are actually more dollar stores in the United States these days than McDonald's, and we really see more shoppers start to go there when prices go up. Difficult times, you know, in so many ways, especially with shortages of supplies as well, right? So what are some ways people can save as they go grocery shopping? Right, so there are a few tips that experts suggest for managing these types of times. So the first is make a shopping list before you go to the grocery store. Try to stick to that shopping list and not be tempted by, you know, sweets and all of the indulgence that grocery stores try to get you to spend on when you're there. Shop around, make sure that you're going to the stores that offer the best prices. Look for deals when you can. Try to buy things on sale. Look for specials that stores are having, and also try to switch when you can from name brands to private label and store brands. Those are usually high quality but are cheaper than the name brands. Yeah, and if you're a weak parent like I am, try not to take your children who are going to be whining, you know, for every little snack that they see in those aisles. Nathaniel Meyerson, great advice. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Ahead this hour, students rally across the country demanding change on gun safety in America. We head live to the nation's capital next. Plus, some of the world's top golfers giving up their PGA affiliation to be part of a new Saudi-backed series. How they're responding to the controversy.
Immerse yourself in the culture of Azerbaijan.
When we wanted to move faster and see more of the world, we found a way.
we also found ways to connect beyond boundaries. And when an unprecedented pandemic tried to derail us, we found ways to get ahead.
Are we ready?
Ready.
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 As your bank, we have stayed proactive, creating dynamic solutions and leveraging cutting-edge technology to drive global expansion into new markets. We rolled up our sleeves to be human together, doing more, innovating smarter, and always showing up for you. So come on board, let's give you more.
Access, more than banking.
On Culinary Journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
The Santos de Cartier. Now, the story goes that in early 20th century Paris, Louis Cartier of the famous jewelry clan had a Brazilian friend, Alberto Santos Dumont. Santos Dumont was one of the pioneers of aviation, but Louis Cartier often heard him complain about the fact that checking your time when you were flying one of the planes of those days, for which you needed both hands, was very difficult when all you have is a pocket watch. So after a while, Louis Cartier presents Santos Dumont with one of the first ever purpose-built wristwatches. And that watch has come down to us as the Santos de Cartier. If you look at this watch, with its squarish profiles, with its exposed screws, what you see are the skills of a master jeweler transferred to watchmaking.
Demands for tighter gun laws are echoing across the country as hundreds of March for Our Lives rallies are scheduled nationwide today. Those taking part want lawmakers to finally address the gun violence epidemic after a series of horrific mass shootings. From Buffalo to Uvalde, Texas, the massacres have reignited outrage and put new pressure on legislators, to take action. The first student-organized mass demonstration happened in 2018 after the deadly high school shooting in Parkland, Florida. Today, more than 300 cities are participating, including New York and D.C., which is where we find CNN's Whitney Wild. Hi there, Whitney. Tell us, what are you seeing now?
Well, good morning, Amara. I want to direct your attention to this really striking display here at the March for Our Lives event. This is a 250-foot lineup of all of the people who've been shot and killed in mass school shootings since 1966, since that shooting at the University of Texas, Austin, that bell tower shooting that took so many lives. And when you see them lined up like this, it is just so striking. It is so gut-wrenching. There are names, ages, dates here. And what it is a reminder of is that the gun violence epidemic began nearly 60 years ago. We are still battling the same problem, and that's the message here today. It's been 4 years since that last enormous march happened in downtown D.C. The last time they were children at the time, begging lawmakers to do something about gun violence. How many lives have been lost since then? And the question now is how many more lives have to be lost before something meaningful happens? So that's the message here today. This display, again, about mass school shootings, but the other main message here today is that gun violence exists in many neighborhoods across the country. So today, the lineup of speakers includes people who've lost loved ones in mass shootings, people who've been victims of mass shootings, but also people who are victims of gun violence in neighborhoods all across America. So a diverse list of people speaking today, but that all centers on the same problem, which is gun violence in America is an epidemic and something has to be done. Again, that's the message coming out of here, downtown Washington, in the shadow of the Washington Monument. Amara.
All right, Whitney Wild, appreciate your reporting. Thank you for that. So let's talk more about this, and I want to bring in Manuel Oliver for his perspective. His son Joaquin Guac Oliver was killed in the Parkland, Florida mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Manuel, you and your wife Patricia have made this your life's mission since losing your son. I appreciate you joining us. You founded an organization to prevent a mass shooting like the one that killed your son from happening again, but it did happen again and again in recent days. How do you process that as lawmakers on Capitol Hill are still trying to find common ground on a gun safety bill, but 2 weeks since at least Uvalde happened?
Well, that's unacceptable, you know. We've been working, as you said, very hard every single day. We work 24/7 on preventing these things from happening. And we did our job. We have done our job. Our part was done. We went there, we voted for leaders, we created these organizations, but you know what? They failed. They betrayed us. So now we are in a moment that it's like we have learned nothing since the last 5 years, and I think it's time to do things in a different way. I am hoping that the reaction is different this time.
Are you optimistic over the fact that at least bipartisan talks are happening? And we're hearing from, Senator Chris Murphy that, he believes he will get at least 10 Republicans or more to vote for a gun safety reform bill, which will obviously be watered down from the bill that was passed by the House this week.
I mean, any move forward to prevent even one life to be lost by gun violence is more than welcome. I hate the fact that we are negotiating this. I hate the fact that they are dealing with the best option for negotiation between parties, between colors, between ideologies. Using the finance language, slang, as a negotiation is really offensive when we're talking about kids, when we're talking about lives. So I hope they do something, but we are doing something right now, and I don't need to hope for that to happen because I know it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. When you say you've done your part, now it's the part for legislators on a national level to do something. And to that point, there's a whole lot of new polling that shows support for gun restrictions since in the wake of Uvalde. And I want to show you some statistics and some polling in recent days. A Quinnipiac University poll showing 57% of adults say they support stricter gun laws. That's up from 45% in November of 2021. 83% support raising the minimum age, to 21 to buy any gun, and 92% support for universal background checks, which support for universal background checks has been high for many years. But nothing changes on at least the congressional national level. Clearly, it shows that the NRA has a stranglehold on many members of Congress. Should we be focusing more on rooting out that problem, money in politics, or focusing on that at the same time as we also try to get new legislation passed?
You know what? We've done that. We have showed these numbers several times. And leaders from other nations get really surprised when they see these numbers. They cannot understand why this is happening, and we cannot solve the problem. So we know these numbers, they know these numbers. They don't want to do anything. The reality is that they don't want to do it. They don't feel the urgency. We need to create that urgency. Asking them to understand that enough is enough, feel sorry about me because I lost my son, that's not going to work. These guys don't like the ethical principle of saving lives. They don't care. Their hands are tied, their souls are sold to the NRA and to the gun industry. That is it. Our tolerance is all the way to the limit. We are the ones that lost the loved ones. We have nothing to lose. You ask for this, you're going to get disruption, and you're going to get a crisis, and you're going to get a whole movement that is willing to make things happen.
So that's where you're putting your hope, is in the 100%. Advocacy of the people.
I am putting my hope on me, because when I was hoping that the leaders will take care of it, they failed. They show that they don't have the bravery that is required for this. However, the youth, the young Americans, they know how to do things. And they ask, and they beg, and they knock doors in Senate and Congress, and they had conversations, and they were ignored. Big mistake. You do not ignore the youth, because then you're going to have a whole movement that at the end of the day will have the final call.
As I'm sure you're aware, there were CEOs from over 200 companies that sent a joint letter to the Senate Thursday demanding bold action, urgent action against gun violence. You tweeted a call for corporate America to speak up and demand change, specifically asking Converse to make a statement. I'm sure those green Converses look familiar to many of those at home. This is an image of Mighty Rodriguez's green Converse high tops. It's become a symbol for the Uvalde tragedy. What do you hear with their silence in this moment?
I think they're waiting for society to demand their response also. And by the way, they are afraid of taking that first step. But trust me, once they take that first step and they show that they stand for us, and Converse, for example, it stops being a recognizable object, which is exactly what happened with those green shoes. They can be a corporation that is supporting our movement, a brand that is with us. And there's a whole demographic for that brand. They don't want to take that risk because they think it's a mistake, it's a financial mistake. Well, guess what? Dick's Sporting Goods didn't think that way. And they made it, and they made a difference. At some point, all these CEOs will be on our side. I can promise you that. Once they discover that there's a whole nation waiting for that moment.
You know, Manuel, moments ago, President Biden tweeted this. Congress needs to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, strengthen background checks, enact safe storage laws and red flag laws, repeal gun manufacturers' immunity from liability. What do you think of this list? Do you agree? Is that enough?
I agree, but let me tell you something. We're talking about the President of the United States. I can tweet something. I don't have the power to call members of Congress and Senate, lock them inside a room, pull up my sleeves and talk about this until we finish and not leave in that room until we have answers for this. So I appreciate the intentions of President Biden. I had this conversation with him, but it's time for more pressure. It's not asking. We don't ask Congress to do things that are obviously what they need to do. We demand them. They work for us. I'm going to vote them out or vote them in or keep them there. They cannot vote me or my son Joaquin out. They will never be able to do that.
I'm taken and inspired by your passion, the urgency in your voice, and obviously I still hear the pain, and I'm sure Joaquin is looking down on you, very proud of the efforts you are making and the fight that you are fighting. Manuel Oliver, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and be ready for something different. Today, we're doing something that no one has done before in terms of gun violence prevention.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Coming up, one down, many more to go. Details on what we learned from this week's January 6th hearing and what's expected at the next one scheduled for Monday.
All new African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Meet the photographers who are capturing stories on equality and social justice.
I felt that it was my responsibility to document our realities.
African Voices Changemakers, this weekend on CNN, in association with Glow.
graceful or potentially criminal that they might have sought pardons from the president. Now, that's a big claim for the committee to have made, and they better be able to back it up. If they're going to say, look, people asked for pardons, they better have evidence that somebody did. But that was a very powerful and strong point.
And another one I want to mention, I want to play sound for a quick few seconds, because the committee introduced several videos showing members of the extremist groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers in meetings ahead of the riots and marching on the Capitol. And committee chair Benny Thompson hinted that the panel had evidence that members of these groups had conversations with Trump's inner circle, trying to draw that direct line. Listen.
Are there going to be witnesses that describe actual conversations between these extremist groups and anyone in Trump's orbit?
Yes.
There will be?
Yes.
Okay, so if it's proven that Trump's inner circle talked with them prior to the riot, how significant would that be, at least from a legal standpoint?
Yeah, there's two big things. Number one, it can show that they were aware that there was going to be violence on the grounds of the Capitol that day, which debunks a lot of the argument that this all came as a surprise. And so there's a big public safety point there, that they did not, for instance, notify the National Guard or other authorities that could have been there, despite the fact that they'd known that these extremist groups might have been there, number one. Number two, yes, there's possible criminal liability if it can be found that folks in the president's quote-unquote orbit, that's the word, we don't know how close it gets to the president, were complicit in the violence, if they knew it was coming and either encouraged it, supported it, or helped it take place. Now, again, that is a very significant charge and claim to make, but it's an open question now that we know that some testimony or evidence might come up about it.
Fascinating. So glad we got to talk to you this morning. Elliot Williams, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
As always, Amber, thanks.
And don't forget, there is a new CNN episode of the original series tomorrow night. What made John Dean decide to testify against Nixon? The tension heats up when the CNN original series Watergate: Blueprint for a Scandal continues tomorrow night at 9 Eastern on CNN.
All new Inside Africa. Go inside the inventive minds, evolving places, and creative trends of the Africa you need to know now. Explore how NFT pioneers find new opportunities for Africa's creative community.
This technology gives them a shot to be seen by a global family of collectors.
Inside Africa, this weekend on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
Everywhere that there are people, they can be exploited. And it is the most profitable form of business today. And in my opinion, the most evil form. My name is Jeannie Mai Jenkins. I'm a television personality and the executive producer of Surviving Sex Trafficking. And I'm talking to you from Atlanta. Surviving Sex Trafficking is a documentary that follows the lives of 5 survivors who are able to tell us about their traumatizing situation with sex trafficking. The dangerous thing is trafficking doesn't happen instantaneously. It's a process. It's a process of building a relationship with somebody, building trust. And trafficking preys on people's dreams. Every single one of us have dreams. And trafficking finds a way to learn what your dreams are, and that trafficker preys on what your dream is and then gives you an exchange or some type of promise through either a relationship or love or affection or money in order for you to make your dreams come true. And that's why our film is intended to educate you, to inspire you through the lives of these survivors, but more than anything, tell you the stories of these 5 women who were trafficked in very different ways and how it could happen to anybody you know as well.
This is an increasingly visual world. And at our core, at a core of our business, what do? We help businesses connect and compete in that visual landscape. And so whether that's small businesses and how they need to compete through our iStock brand, or whether that's corporations as they struggle to how to have a presence across TikTok and Instagram and all the platforms that they need to be present on, we see just a huge amount of demand for our service. And then with the growth of video, increasingly, being a medium in which not only the media needs to produce, but corporations and businesses need to have a video presence. That's another core driver of this business. But we see a lot of growth opportunities across Getty Images.
I want this show, One World, to be a place where people watching from all corners of the globe can understand why what happens in Africa has a huge impact on all of our lives in ways we might never even know. Because of my background, I am well aware of the vibrancy of this continent, and I want to show that to the world. People of my continent do deserve to be heard. We are rich in ways beyond the soil beneath our feet.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
We're here now at the home of one of the FSB team, and my name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
It's just been a chaotic scene here. People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
We were just in the hospital. It was shocking. Why do you think India has been hit so badly?
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
Why does a small group of women asking for their right to be educated threaten you so much? Raise your hand if you love school.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
You can hear gunshots every couple minutes. Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their story.
Now to the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, where world leaders are gathered for discussions on Indo-Pacific security, but where Ukraine has dominated talks. In a virtual address, President Zelensky said he's confident his country will prevail over Russia, but also urged Asian leaders to help. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin pointing to Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an example of what happens when nations veer from international laws. CNN's Oren Lieberman with more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the Shangri-La Dialogue on Saturday afternoon, saying the future rules of the world are being decided on the battlefields of Ukraine, and that the countries that have continued to provide so much support to Ukraine over the course of the past 108 days since the start of this conflict should continue to do so. He thanked the countries that have provided that aid and also said it's not just for Ukraine, it's also for you. As he's done so often in the past, Zelensky tailored his comments to the venue and to the conference here in Singapore. He quoted Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore, as he spoke. That added effect to make it clear to the audience here. He knows his audience, he knows who he's talking to, and the importance of all of those in attendance. Military leaders, defense ministers from so many countries around the world, and of course in the region here. Ukraine has hung over this conference for two reasons. First, it's been the biggest story in the world for the course of the past 108 days, but also because of the parallels between Ukraine and Taiwan. Russia, the larger, more powerful country, invading its smaller, less powerful neighbor, and the possibility, the warnings coming from the U.S. that it's China, the more powerful country, trying to dictate the future of Taiwan, its smaller, less powerful neighbor there. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, speaking earlier than Zelensky on Saturday morning, said that's one of the key issues here. And though the U.S. is still committed to its one China policy, it has the right and the ability to arm Taiwan with defensive weaponry under the Taiwan Relations Act, and it will continue to do so. Austin also expressed concern that it was China that was trying to change the status quo when it comes to Taiwan with its increasingly aggressive actions in the region, not only against the U.S., but also its allies. China, in a statement shortly after Austin's remarks, said that it was the U.S. in that speech trying to instigate a conflict, and that it was some false rumors and false accusations against China. So very much on the issue of Taiwan, the U.S. and China seeming to talk past each other. Oren Lieberman, CNN in Singapore.
Thanks for that, Oren. Still ahead, the list of golfers joining the controversial Saudi-backed series is growing. And that's despite the PGA Tour suspending 17 players for participating. We'll talk about that next.
When you invest in people, you give them the opportunity to be more. With up to 20 million young people joining the African workforce each year, empowering the next generation has never been more important. Access Bank's Project LEAD has equipped over 90,000 students with leadership training. And our Pitchathon scheme invests in female entrepreneurs, helping them realize their vision. Access. More than banking.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks and sometimes go down a path that's not marked.
Where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
These protests are a test for Hamas. Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again. The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks and security forces firing tear gas.
When you dare to take risks, you witness passion and persistence.
And they just want to get their past be processed so they can get out of this facility.
And that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here?
How concerned are you about the front line?
You don't believe that there's a racial divide here?
Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think? All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
I'm Patrick Ottman in Havana, Cuba, and this is CNN.
June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
The list of players joining a controversial new golf tour is growing. Bryson DeChambeau is the latest blockbuster name to sign on to the Saudi-backed Live Golf Series. He joins six-time major winner Phil Mickelson and former world #1 Dustin Johnson as headliners for this new venture. The PGA responding with suspensions for 17 golfers participating and warning the same will happen to other players who jump ship. CNN's Brian Todd has more.
Top sports figures again converging with politics and drawing controversy. The PGA Tour has suspended some of golf's biggest stars who've decided to play in a new breakaway golf series called Live Golf, backed by a Saudi wealth fund chaired by Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and the man who U.S. intelligence said approved the operation which led to the murder and dismemberment of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018, which bin Salman has denied.
These are significant names in the world of golf who are making this jump to this new entity, and the PGA Tour finds himself in a really, really precarious position right now.
The biggest names to jump to the Saudi series, former world #1 player Dustin Johnson, former U.S. Open champion Bryson DeChambeau, and the player whose jump has caused the most controversy, six-time major tournament winner Phil Mickelson. Mickelson and Johnson are each reportedly getting a 9-figure payout to take part in the Saudi series. Earlier this year, the author of a biography on Mickelson quoted the golfer as saying of the Saudis, "They're scary mother effers to get involved with. They execute people over there for being gay. Knowing all of this, why would I even consider it? Because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape how the PGA Tour operates." This week, Mickelson said he doesn't condone human rights violations.
I'm certainly aware of what has happened with Jamal Khashoggi, and I think it's terrible. I've also seen the good that the game of golf has done throughout history, and I believe that Live Golf is going to do a lot of good for the game as well.
Hardly satisfying to Mickelson's critics.
He knows where the money's coming from, and he's doing it willingly, and he's helping MBS to burnish his image. He has really been bribed to be a part of the PR machine of the Saudis.
Mickelson's not the only golf star who's been criticized for downplaying Saudi human rights abuses. Former world #1 player Greg Norman, now the CEO of Live Golf, was quoted recently as saying, "Look, we've all made mistakes, and you just want to learn by those mistakes and how you can correct them going forward." Some critics accuse the Saudis of so-called sports washing, sponsoring lucrative sporting events in an effort to clean up their reputation. One analyst says that's only part of the kingdom's ambition.
They want to go from 30 million tourists a year right now to 100